Or we're back here at the Toronto Real Estate Forum the afternoon on Thursday. So we're winding down. Although I'm excited because this is an interview I've been looking forward to. I'm Aaron. He's Adam. This is the Commercial Real Estate Podcast powered by First National. Recording here, as I said, at Treff. I'd like to thank our sponsors, CGI and Doust Vukovic. Our guest is Vic Gupta, CEO of Create TO. I was going to say not president, but there is no president, so that wouldn't have been fair. He's just the CEO and implied president.
There you go.
If you're a long-time listener, you will remember we had Salima Raji on 2 or 3 years ago to discuss Create TO. And Vic was at the helm at the time, but I think a lot's changed. So we're going to probably do a refresher on what is Create TO, just for our listeners to keep up. Before we go there, we always like to just hear how you ended up at this role of CEO of Create TO. So what was your career like?
What was my journey?
Yeah.
So interestingly, my background was not in real estate, other than being an investor, a personal investor in real estate myself. I've been an entrepreneur. I've had a couple of different businesses that I've ran, some successfully, some not. But I've always been very politically active, and so I worked for a time in Mayor John Tory's office and helped run that office, was responsible for policy and his legislative strategy. And one thing that John talked a lot about back in those days was sort of not understanding how we leveraged our real estate at the city. So the city has $27 billion, arguably, give or take, book of business, and or a book of real estate. Shouldn't call it a book of business, but a book of real estate. And really, the real estate at the City of Toronto was always just a piece of dirt that a program operated. So you operated a community center, you operated a library, and that division actually owned effectively sort of responsibility for the real estate. And so, I think the best way to talk about it is to use sort of the REIT example of Loblaws and CT. At some point, somebody smart figured out that we're not a retailer that happens to sit on real estate. We're actually a real estate company that operates one vertical in retail, in grocery retail or consumer product goods. And so you saw the value intrinsically that was created by creating this separate entity. And so I think, just to put it simply, I think John figured that out and said, wait a minute, we need to understand how to leverage our real estate more effectively to create co-location opportunities, to monetize it, to build out more housing. And really it was based on the fact that we, as a city, have huge demands. We're a growing city, huge demands on providing more and more public services. And we just can't we don't have the money to buy real estate the way you would if you had an investment backed pool of capital, as it were. And so that's how Creatio started. I had then left so I was part of sort of setting it all up, getting approvals through council. It was an amalgamation of a couple of existing corporations that the city had, but with this renewed and broader mandate of really serving the divisions of the city as a center of excellence for real estate. And so I left the office and went and did other things, and there was an opportunity to apply for a job there at a senior level, which I did, and through a pretty rigorous interview process, I got the job. And so I was running a part of the business, which was all of our Portland's business, which we can talk about as we go through this. And then I had the opportunity, our CEO left, and I applied for the top job, and I got it. And I'd say, my success in the role is, I think, is a combination of the fact that I have run a business myself. I have an entrepreneurial mindset, and so I understand the mentality of a private developer, the private sector, in terms of getting to a deal, and understanding shared risk in that. But I understand how to get things done in government, and ultimately, I decided at one point in my career that I needed purpose. I needed to have a mission-driven role. I've had success in my career. I feel very fortunate for that. And so I needed to be able to get up every day and feel like I was making a difference. And to be able to get up every day and work with a dedicated team of public servants who whose goal, whose mission it is to take our real estate to improve the lives of the people of the city, provide more services. I think it's a real calling, and we feel privileged to do it.
So is that the mission as defined?
Yeah, the mission is to shape Toronto's future through innovative and collaborative real estate solutions. Our purpose is to build the city we love. And so we've taken, we spent a lot of time thinking about these things, and I worked with the team to say, look, at the end of the day, you could do a lot of other things and maybe make more money doing it, but you're here for a reason, and why is it? And so not that everybody lives, within the 416, they certainly think of the city as their home, and they want to build. And what kind of city, what is the city we love? Well, a city that gives opportunity for everybody, gives services for everybody, gives us a chance to, live our dreams. And so we feel like we're contributing in that way, in some small way.
Well, on that theme, I want to ask, because you kind of corrected yourself when you said book of business, then said no book of real estate. Is that because notionally a piece of real estate pursuing the highest capital use for it might not be the actual best, holistic city use for that asset? Is that why you corrected yourself there?
Yeah, I think we get caught in this idea that because a piece of real estate, might have a certain highest and best use potential, that's what we should use it for. So we should sell that and monetize it, take that value, and then spend it on something else. But that piece of real estate might be exactly where we need a community center or a library or a daycare, or we should be able to look at that and combine those uses. And so that's why I think we got to be careful, as it's public land and it's for the benefit and owned by the people of the city, right, through their taxes. And so I think we need to understand what is the best use. So I always talk, like a lot of people do, but triple bottom line, right? Like I think we run a self-sufficient organization, so we generate enough income to pay for ourselves, so we're not a drag on the city's books. But I think ultimately we're measured on those sort of very specific results we deliver. How many houses, how much affordable housing and purpose-built rental have we built? How many, or have we got approved? Building them versus getting them approved, they're two different things. But, how are we advancing all of the city's important needs to provide greater services to the people through the use of the real estate? So again, we need more shelters, right? We're going through a program now where we're going to have to expand the number of shelters to get people off the street. That's something that we would help solution. One might say, well, why would you put a shelter there? You can put a 10-story building. Well, it's because we really need a shelter there so people aren't homeless and have a place to rest their head, right? That kind of thing. So that's what I mean when I...
So you mentioned $27 billion of real estate.
Yeah.
Maybe just describe what that's comprised of.
So it's everything from the city's parkland portfolio, which is probably $7 or $8 billion of that, to the the social housing stock that we have through Toronto Community Housing, which is probably another $7 or $8 billion. Again, valued at one point in time, probably at the peak of the market, I might say. But and then just everything else. So all of the real estate that our libraries, our community centers, all of those, our parking lots, which is obviously a huge opportunity for leveraging what one might think is underutilized. Parking is also important. We need that, but it's all of that combination. And then there's pieces of real estate that you would be surprised that the city owns. We have a lot of long-term land leases where commercial operations sit on. So, for example, the land that the Sheridan Center sits on is owned by the City of Toronto. There's a fantastic piece of land which I hope I get to redevelop before I leave Créteil at some point in the future, that sits right across from the Harbour Castle West End, where the Harbour Castle has its conference center. Anyone in the development business who walks by that probably says, man, why isn't that redeveloped? It's probably because the city owns it. And in that case, the city does own that. So there's a long-term land lease with the operators of the Harbour Castle.
This would be on the north side of the street?
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. That beautiful, I say with air quotes, concrete building that's got a big sign on the side of it or what have you. Yeah, so there are some interesting pieces of real estate that the city has owned and accumulated over time. And, I think the best part about being able to leverage and develop the city's public land is it has virtually zero book value to the city, as in they don't borrow against their land. It doesn't really sit on a balance sheet anywhere.
The libraries aren't paying rent.
They aren't paying rent. And so when you can leverage that, you got, as we all know, you embed in a zero land value on your pro forma, helps the pro forma.
Just a little bit.
Right?
In fact, right now, that's the only way.
That's probably the only way pro formas are working, yeah.
Well, I think on the last episode we did with Salima, she brought up the notion that some property might have a negative value. You have to pay a developer to take over, but we won't get into that.
Yeah.
We assume zero. So you mentioned, acquiring and disposing, and again, we kind of think of Create.to as taking sites, getting them ready for developers, selling it, as you mentioned. But how much acquiring are you doing?
We do a little bit. I mean, again, we have to work closely with the city in terms of finding a source of capital, but strategically acquiring sites that are maybe adjacent to existing city-owned real estate, that obviously with that, just like any developer would. I mean, we like to be strategic either because there's a need for the city to have that real estate for a future expansion of a program or a service, or because by assembling it creates a better development opportunity for us. So we are looking at acquisition opportunities. I would say they're few and far between. There's a lot of people to convince, including the city's chief financial officer, that's a good way of land banking.
Well, presumably if you want it, others want it too, and I suspect it's got to be a competitive bidding process, likely.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have to pay fair market value. So
right,
when you get into a bidding war, not that that's happening these days, but someone might be willing to pay more than we can justify through an appraisal. So,
right.
Would you be involved in expropriation at all?
We would be. I think we would be involved in expropriation in terms of making the city's case for why a site needs to be expropriated. Or on the other hand, if sometimes the provincial government or other governments want to expropriate city land, we certainly try to make sure we get highest value for that. So we'll sometimes be asked to think about it from what could we develop there, and working with our planning department to support that.
How many people in your organization?
So we have about close to 90 full-time with some contract employees, so 84, 85 full-time, and about 90 in total.
It's a lean team for $27 billion.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, and we've grown. I mean, we've, our sort of legacy corps probably had, 60% of that, so we've grown the team, and they go flat out. I mean, we are probably active on... We probably have 50 or 60 projects that we're actively working on. We probably have 200 that are on the roster in terms of requests that we've had to look at pieces of real estate. We work with the city council and the individual councillors on what they want to see happen in their communities. We work with all the city divisions. So it's busy.
Prioritization's got to be a real challenge.
It's a real challenge.
So you've looked at your roster. You got 27 billion. I don't forget the number, but it's thousands of parcels of land, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
You've ranked them all likely in sort of the most I would say most attractive for development, most attractive for action. How do you put that list together?
Well, what we've tried to do is we've actually broken the city's all of their real estate assets into 10 or 11 different asset classes. So from we've taken the office portfolio where we have, which is where all of our city employees work as an asset class, for example.
So it includes like City Hall.
Absolutely, including City Hall, and then we have a whole set of yards, public yards where all of the city's equipment may rest and so on. We've got the libraries, the community centers, the Toronto Parking Authority portfolio, and so we've gone through a process to sort of analyze each of those portfolios to see if there are opportunities where there's underutilized real estate, and that kind of creates our supply. And then similarly, we work with the divisions of the city to understand their sort of longer term capital needs for real estate as they want to grow their programs, and somehow we try to put that chocolate and peanut butter together to create something, to create a real estate strategy over the next decade or 10 to 20 years that we can then try and execute. And then of course that's if you were able to work in a vacuum and had no one then lobbying in this housing crisis, and then all of a sudden we're pivoting to spend, I'd say at least 50 to 60% of our overall time.
Are you saying that politicians try to influence your decision making?
Yeah, I was going to ask you if city councilors, you never end up at odds with them.
Shockingly, they do, and we're happy for it. That's our job. We're here to serve and work with city council. It's a political organization, of course. So yes.
Yeah. So is it typically, so you've mushed the peanut butter and chocolate together to full on that analogy, and you've got to serve it to the private community to buy, right? Is that typically how you do it?
Well, I think, more specifically, I'd say, on a site by site basis, that's exactly right. If there is a housing opportunity that we expect to be delivered by the private development community, then we would go out to the market. So if
once it's entitled,
once it's entitled. So what we typically have done is, I think there's a couple of different things that happen at the same time. So while we're developing out this longer term strategy, what we're also doing is, again, taking direction from council, with the mayor has put forward kind of almost sort of trumped Tory, if you will, in terms of number of housing. John had a proposal for 40,000 homes over 10 years. Mayor Chow kind of added 25,000 more to that and say, okay, we got to deliver 65,000 homes. So we are part of the team of people at the city that is trying to advance that. So we've identified probably 30 different sites, 28 of them under a program that it's called Housing Now. And so we've already identified those sites. So we will entitle those sites, but in part of entitling them, we'll also be working with, again, as I said earlier, that's where sort of the first part of what I talked about, where we work with our city divisions to understand their needs. We might put out a site to market to say, okay, you're going to build, the expectation is you're going to build, I don't know, let's just say 500 units of housing on 2 towers, but you got to put in a small community center or 20,000 square feet of community space. You have to have some office. We're going to we need to put a park over here, that kind of thing. And of course, the bigger the precinct or the landmass, then the more city program that has to go in that. So we'll put that out to market through a competitive process. We'll have all those requirements in there. We expect, 30% affordable housing at a particular definition of that. The rest of it is purpose-built rental. And what we do now is we don't sell the land. We are, for the most part, doing 99-year long-term land leases. And so we'll put all that out.
Why is that? Is it just to generate the cash flow?
No, it's really more, I think it's a little more philosophical than that, quite frankly. I think that there's a mindset at the city that we're not building any more land. There is no more land, and that we can't. I think we now see, if we look in the rearview mirror from 20 and 30 years ago, there's pieces of land that the city owned that they did sell, and now looking at it from that perspective, probably most people would have said, maybe we shouldn't have sold that. Maybe that was an important piece. The value has grown. We would have needed it for something, and so I think it's really about saying it's not our. We have a responsibility to ensure that a future city council has this land back in their hands. So
there's not a terminal point on Create Hill because you've sold the entire cupboards bare.
That's right. Exactly. And sure, we recognize
you're creating 100-year job security for yourself.
Yes. Yeah. That's right. And we recognize we're losing a little bit of value by not selling the land versus doing a long-term land lease. But I think that's the direction that we've been asked to go in.
Given that land's a bit of a tougher asset at the moment, are you putting the pause button on any opportunities you would have brought to market around this time? Or
no, you know what? We're busier than ever. I think we're busy because, again, there's a part of our business that land value isn't really necessarily a factor. As in, if we have a site, for example, where we've solutioned a co-location of a number of city programs and there's no housing, well, that's just a project that the city would just tender itself and deliver. But, the city, I think all governments at all 3 levels have, I think they can always be even better coordinated, but I think have recognized the need to put investments into affordable housing. And so, and the city has, I think we initially had a program where we expected, or actually not expected, the numbers actually penciled where we could take our land, vend it in, and for our land value, we were going to get 1/3 affordable housing over 99 years. And the developer could make their modest yield, modest returns, And then, of course, the pandemic hit and these inflationary pressures and so forth. And so now that doesn't work. And so we did push the pause button during COVID. And we had a lot of deals that were ready to go. But thanks to, quite frankly, the political courage of many politicians at all levels of government, they've dumped in a bunch of incentives, whether that's waivers on market DCs or, quite frankly, just cash subsidies to fill that equity gap. We do have commitments now on a number of projects. The federal government put a program together called the Housing Accelerator Fund. It was $500 million to the city of Toronto. It's not immaterial. So we've been able to get projects going. We have a couple of them. We just broke ground on, we announced one last week and broke ground on another one last week as well, which are amazing projects, which I'd be happy to talk about. But
well, do you want to get into some of the projects?
Can we talk about how? Yeah, I do want to get into projects, and I agree that's where we'll go next. I wanted to pull on the affordability for a second, and this is just more of a philosophical conversation and debate. You're a real estate person, so are we, and so let's talk as real estate nerds. We have this conversation regularly inside and outside of the podcast about the definition of affordability and the need for affordability. And one of the things, we talk about at First National, largest apartment lender in the country. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure you're aware, and by far the largest developer. Like, we've financed well over $5 billion of apartments across the country. Largest financing of affordable units. So I'm not pretending it's not important. However, it's ultimately just a supply challenge. And so when we're talking to our clients and developers, often they feel a bit frustrated because there's this pressure to build affordable, but to the detriment of any building, right? Because they're now all of a sudden with the affordable requirements that are coming down from not your municipality, but many municipalities, it makes the pro forma not work, right? Yep. And so all of a sudden there's this push to build affordable units, and that basically means you're getting no units developed. And I'm curious how that discussion occurs internally at times, because externally, sitting outside of the city, it's kind of like, well, geez, guys, don't you understand? I know, I get it, you want affordable, but if we just build more units, that will put downward pressure on rents. Ultimately, we just need supply. Forget the affordability all the time. Yep. I'm sure at certain components.
It's a politically viable position.
Yes, right. Well, but you know what I mean. You know what I'm getting at.
No,
right?
Listen, so, I'm happy to talk about that. I don't disagree with that at all. I think we need more supply, period, right? And ultimately more rental supply, or more supply, because we can also have the rent versus ownership discussion as well. But I think that we need more supply, period. But I do believe that we need specifically capped rents on for a certain segment of the population. The position that I would take is, I'll leave it up to the federal government to decide at the end of the day, what the federal government's really doing is they've provided a significant sums of money to the municipalities to deliver whatever it wants to deliver, very little strings attached. But in terms of its lending programs, I think this is what you're referring to, where they've now different programs, the ones that have probably the bigger pools of opportunity, bigger pools of capital to draw from, have strings attached in terms of affordability. And yeah, look, I think if you're building on private land and you're able to just get your deals penciling and it's lower cost, longer term money from the federal government, just let's have at it. I think where I would draw the distinction is on public land. So I think that the city says, look, if you're going to develop on public land, there is an expectation that we should have some affordable housing, because the affordable housing, it's not just about affordable housing. It's about aligning all sorts of public policy objectives for the cities, which is we want, we talk about the 15-minute city. We can say we want people to live, work, and play in the same area. Those are all really important things. It's good for your health and well-being. It's good for the environment, right? We want to drive people onto transit. All of those things, I think, check a number of boxes. If you add affordable, we need the working class, let's call it, people that are gig workers and nurses and teachers and folks and we're not talking, this isn't the lowest end of the sort of socioeconomic spectrum. We're talking about folks who are making $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year, who can't afford to live anywhere near the city. Right, so I think the idea of requiring on public land some level of affordability, I think, is an important attribute.
Well, and particularly if you're adjusting whatever input you need from the private sector to account for that lost revenue as a result of the affordability. That makes sense. And no, I actually wasn't talking about the CMHC programs, whether it's the ACLP or MLI Select. I think both those programs have been incredible for our industry, regardless of the affordability. I think the affordability is actually quite reasonable at 10%, at 30% of the median income. I was actually referring to some as-of-right zoning. It sounds like this was Brad Bradford, who we had on recently, just talking about some as-of-right zoning that's now, it appears, is going to be coming with only if you build affordable, and that is going to cause a ton of the potential development just to not occur.
Yeah.
And so that's again not a shot at just the city of Toronto. I think a lot of municipalities are struggling with this, where they want to mandate affordability, and then the developers are going, well, then I can't build.
Yeah. No, and I don't know if I would. I think that's right. I mean, I think, look at mid-rise guidelines, for example, which are changing, but it's sort of one footstep forward and one footstep backward. I think, we need simplicity of development. We need scalability, right? Even things like, no street wall condition or step backs that are required. So you can build up to 10 stories now on a mid-rise, but because you can't have an efficient floor plate, it's still not going to work. So it's great. We can trumpet the fact that we got these, we're shifting, but we still have, dual staircases and things like that make the deals not work. So I think I will say this, that I've learned a great deal, having been on the public side, public policy and political side, being an entrepreneur. I've learned a lot. And now in this seat, it just takes time. I think the governments have come a long way. I mean, we did a panel earlier. We talked about density, shadowing, all of those sorts of things. Setbacks are becoming less and less of an issue for planning departments. I don't think I ever would have thought that 10 years ago. Those seem to be, sort of the third rail. They'd never want to touch that. Now those are easy conversations. Oh, we'll give you more density. We all know density doesn't solve every problem, right? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We can't sell or rent more units. So I think we got to give the city some time. We got to give municipalities a bit of time, but I think they're getting there.
Well, hopefully there's people like you advocating for reasonability internally.
Yeah.
Deals.
Let's talk about deals. I mean, very high profile one recently. Creatio brought, I guess, the Greyhound terminal, we'll call it locally, to market a couple, even 2 years ago, probably. I guess went under contract just recently with Tricon Kilmer. That is primetime real estate, as primetime as it gets. For anybody not from Toronto, it's
literally the center.
It's a city block and a substantial one. Currently a low-rise Greyhound terminal, or was, and now I'm sure will be. Well, maybe you can speak to the density available there and what the plans are.
Yeah, so it's I won't be able to quote you the exact sort of GFA, but it's so it's 2 towers. I think the tallest tower is probably approaching 40 stories. The shorter one is, it's actually kind of a fat mid-rise. Actually, it's about 15 stories. We had to adjust the density because of the flight path, but we pivoted. And again, there's an example of our planning department working well with us, so we didn't lose the development opportunity because of a issue with the hospital flight path. I mean, it's a project we're so proud of at Creatio, and the city should be proud of it as well. This terminal was declared surplus, and it's been vacant now for a little while. So we did a two-part RFP process. We created a short list. We had 16 developers bid in the opening round. Cool. And so it's been, great. Obviously...
Well, for scale, too, I mean, what would be the sale price on this? How many, you got 16 developers and cut these kinds of checks? Like, what would the number be on that?
Well, I mean, if you're asking what the land value would be, I mean, it again, when we would have valued it back a few years back, it's probably somewhere between $150 to $200 million for that for the density we were talking about. And so on this particular one now, what we've really done is I got the question when we did the announcement, well, how much is this going to cost the city? And I said, it's not going to cost the city anything. And we said, well, how is that possible? I said, well, this is where you're trying to give reporters an education in land economics, right? I said, well, a piece of land is worth what you can do with it. So in this case, we could do quite a bit with it, and it's got, strong rents. We expect strong rents, and it is a land lease. It's a 100% rental building. It's 800, I think almost 900 units. The requirement was that they build 1/3 affordable housing. So it's going to have almost 300 units of affordable housing at the city's income-based definition of affordable. We said we want you to think about this site we want you to respect and consider the heritage aspects of the building, of the coach terminal building itself, both inside and outside. And we want you to think about this site in its proximity to the health sector cluster that we have on University Avenue.
Sick Kids is literally immediately behind.
Yeah,
it.
and UHN is right there, and so the proposal that Tricon Kilmer came back with is just fantastic. So it's those aspects on the housing side. They're going to have an adaptive reuse, retail, cafes on the ground floor. They're going to restore that heritage building.
It's a cool strip of Dundas for those that don't live in the city. Like you can buy Greek food and then go across the street and get Korean and then go across the street and get Chinese. Like
That's
is
right.
a really awesome of all independent stores, independent
It's very
restaurant.
cool.
It's a very cool.
Yeah, it's a
town.
very cool street. And then on top of that, I think, almost the sort of the cherry on top was they worked with UHN and as a partner, and so there's going to be a state-of-the-art organ repair center in that development as well. And what that really means for folks who might not know is that when I guess what I've also learned is when you have an organ donation, that most times those organs actually have to be repaired before they can be, donated to somebody. And so they are going to literally fly in organs in this repair center, get them ready for to provide to somebody to save a life. So it's really quite something.
There's an ambulance terminal.
There's a paramedic hub, which again, we're going to, somebody said to me, does that mean that the paramedics that wait in the emergency room because they have nowhere else to wait in between calls are going to be there in your depot? I said, absolutely. That's exactly right. So I think it's even going to be, it's very, very significant. It's going to be one of 6 or 7 of its size in all of the city of Toronto. So it's a hugely important paramedic hub. And then the strip of street on Elizabeth between the two parcels of land, we're going to work with our planning department to narrow that and to turn that into it's still going to be a publicly accessible road, but it'll be a plaza promenade area that I think the folks in the development community that listen to this will really appreciate. I mean, it's a star-studded cast of architect studio gang out of Chicago. Claude Comey and Associates is a landscape architect. There's in smoke architecture in the indigenous community. There's indigenous placemaking that's going to be respected. There's a partnership with Wigwaman, which is an affordable housing provider in the indigenous community. They're going to provide some of the affordable. And then the other affordable housing is going to be a health sector co-op. So actually the affordable housing is going to be targeted towards those that work in the healthcare sector, whether that's nurses, custodians, like what technicians, whatever. Again, not the doctors that are making high 6-figure
There's already
salaries.
plenty of new units for them.
That's right, exactly.
5,000
exactly. They'll be in the other penthouse units in that development. So we're really, really proud of it, and I think we were able to leverage that land value, put out a proposal call, really be very ambitious, and be able to structure a deal with our partners that I think before and I don't want to take all the credit, but before the creation of an organization like ours, I just don't think the city and most municipalities are not set up to kind of cut these kinds of deals the way we are.
So it sold the land, or it's 90
No,
years
this is a 99-year.
Well, that's the
land
crazy
lease.
part too. If you're valuing it at 150, 200 million, that's on a land lease basis. If you did outright sale, the value would be that much more.
Yeah.
It's a very valuable real estate.
Yeah. And then I think the other project, if I can just take a minute on, is we broke ground on a affordable housing project up on Wilson Heights in the Downsview precinct, and that's going to be 1,500 units of housing. That one actually we did. That's that's a deal from. I feel like saying it's a legacy deal. It's a legacy as in from 2019. Legacy. We finally got that deal in the ground, but at that time we were doing some fee simple, and so it's 1/3 condo, 1/3 market rental, 1/3 affordable housing. Our partners are Kingset and Greenwin, and Tridel is building it, and that's another great project that we're excited about.
And that's broken ground, you said?
It just broke ground, yeah. Just had a shovel in my hand with the mayor last week.
Let's keep on deals. We're almost out of time. So there's 6 points. There's Portlands. Like, what would you like to talk about?
I'd love to talk about Portlands. when I think about what we're excited about in the future, on behalf of the city of Toronto, I think we have this amazing privilege to look after, manage the portfolio of assets in the Portlands. It's about 400 acres of land. Much of it is developable. Waterfront Toronto, our partners, are now completed or about to complete the new river. For those that aren't familiar, you should just Google that, the flood protection.
For those
work.
who are not from Toronto, this is like the southeast corner of the city, almost walking distance to downtown.
Yeah,
it's 400 acres of land.
And it was in a flood. It was in a flood zone, so there's a almost $2 billion project that all three governments have funded to reroute the mouth of the Don River so that land can all be developed. Not just that land, but a bunch of other east port lands. So we're excited about that. We manage a book of business there of 80 tenants. This I will call a book of business because it's actually this is what generates most of our revenue for our organization. It's industrial land. It's really important in close proximity to the city. We have logistics businesses. We have all of our aggregate guys who we need all that building material to build the city up. But we manage 80 tenants. We have an aggressive leasing portfolio, but we're also doing a lot of pre-development work on future phases of development in there. And, again, only real estate people can be patient enough to be excited about things that are going to happen 10 and 15 years from now. But we're really, really excited. There's 9 different precincts, each of them 20 to 40 acres, a lot of really exciting development opportunity. We're building a film studio on a 9-acre parcel. The developer is the largest studio developer in the world, Hackman Capital. So that should break ground in the next year or so. That's an important film campus for us, and many people won't know how important the film industry is to Toronto. It's 3rd or 4th largest employer, and so we're excited about that project as well. So lots of opportunity in the Portlands. If you're long and you have the patience, as we all do in real estate, then that's an area to be really excited about.
Can't wait to walk it in 25 years.
With your walker, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Your grandkids in tow.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Maybe we'll do forward looking. I mean, as Aaron said, we are just about out of time here, but you can just stick with us for a minute longer. Aaron also alluded to kind of a hierarchy of opportunities that you're working through now. What would you see further down that list? Not in the radar now, not on the public, but an opportunity you say that's going to be cool to work on in 2030.
No, that's a tough question. I mean, I would say again the work we're doing in the Portlands is definitely forward looking for sure. I think for us, what we're really excited about is taking on complicated sites that have been underinvested in and that have multiple uses. So I'll give you 2 projects, for example, that we're excited about. One is in Parkdale. We've taken a piece of land. We actually did acquire another piece to go with it where there's going to be a rebuilt, brand new. It's a hub. It's a community center, a library, affordable housing. In fact, there's a Toronto community housing, social housing project there. It's going to be a new park. That kind of. There's a number of sites like that at Dundas and Bathurst, where the Scatting Court community is. Again, an area of the city that, could you imagine? I think it's 18 or 20 acres of land there that, again, have an underinvested pool, community center, pool, library. You're seeing the theme here. And again, if we can leverage some of that land value to pay for some of this that the city couldn't otherwise pay for, that's our sweet spot as Creatio, is taking on complicated sites that have multiple uses, multifaceted uses, where we can leverage the land to create a little bit of value, develop it for housing, but then develop all these other sort of co-located uses.
You carve off a slice, sell it privately, and then take that revenue to invest into the city.
Yeah, I think at its simplest, absolutely. Community maybe less so sell it again, more look at.
So that's what I mean. Same concept.
Yeah.
Well, I think that is it, Vic. Thanks for sticking around. We ran a little long here, but we appreciate everything you've shared with us today. Of course, we want to thank our sponsors for this video speaker series, Dow Vukovic and CGI. The Canadian Real Estate Forums are hosting us here at the Toronto Real Estate Forum, day 2. We're coming down the home stretch. Most of all, though, Vic, appreciate everything.
Yeah, that was great. Really interesting interview.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
thank you. I love it. I loved it. I'm sure I have to go somewhere else, but
Yeah,
you know,
have to
happy
go
to chat.
talk real estate somewhere else.
Yeah,
If you love
we can
real
talk
estate,
whatever,
you
we
do-
can talk whatever we want.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
I love this. So
Cool.
thank you
Thanks,
guys.
man.
I appreciate
Appreciate
the
it.
opportunity.